Hey.
So my name is Mihai. I'm from ProductTank Dubai, and we have Stefan
From ProductTank Bucharest, and then we have Teresa.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi. And then we just very quickly to mention, we have ProductTank Ukraine represented by
Teresa.
Yeah.
Hello.
So we have ProductTank Ukraine represented by Alexandra. We have ProductTank Turkey represented by Ezgi, and then we have ProductTank Estonia represented by Osam. They are also part of the effort, so big shout. And actually, we do this exercise with all of our meetups. If you can just mention the city where you are from, so then we just mix a little bit the whole world into the situation. And then, yeah, so we have 10 copies of Teresa's new book, which we're gonna distribute towards the end of the event with our participants. And we've decided to split to split this offering for the best questions that you guys are gonna ask towards the end, and also we'll also share some of the books for those who ask questions from through the feedback form that we're going to share at the end of the event.
Okay, so we have people writing us there from Yash, and we have from Tenerife, Canary Islands, Dubai. Seems like you brought a lot of friends to Mihai, not fair. We got Lviv, and there's some more Dubai. Seems like mentioning your colleagues makes them want to fight us. They keep going, Dubai.
I mean, look, Dubai it's such a digital environment, and I guess everybody wants to learn a little bit more from Teresa's concept. So yeah, I'm quite excited to see so much interest. Teresa, I always wanted to have the option to address this question. How did you come up with the idea of continuous discovery? I mean, I'm a passionate product reader, and I read like a lot of books related to product, but your whole book is a whole different concept. And I was super excited. The moment I've heard the title, I said, okay, no matter what, I really need to gain some of this experience. So how was it for you? How did you discover the fact that you have to write a book on continuous discovery habits?
Yeah, it was just from experience of working with teams and recognizing that most teams don't spend enough time with their customers. And then the result of that is that we tend to build the wrong thing or things that don't work quite as well as they could have. And so I was really just interested in how do we solve that problem? How do we get teams spending more time with their customers in a way that gets them reliable feedback? And I've been really lucky that I've been able to work with teams for the last 10 years, just iterating on that problem and looking at how do we make it as easy as possible for teams to make better product decisions.
Interesting. And along the journey, do you have any other books that have influenced your career, or is there any book that you can recommend other than your book?
Yeah, so one of the books that's had a big influence on my thinking is called Decisive by Chip and Dan Heath. That book just summarizes the best of what we know about decision-making research. And since so much of discovery is about making good decisions, that book does a really great job of helping us think about where does our brains interfere with making good decisions. And you'll see a lot of ideas from that book make its way into continuous discovery habits. A lot of what I'm doing is trying to design a framework that helps us make better decisions.
Okay. Well, I hope we're going to have the ability to learn more about that. We'll spend another probably 1 or 2 minutes to give some time to people who are probably coming online now, and then we can kick off the meeting.
That's great. I would like to emphasize that at the end of our discussion, we're going to have a Q&A session. And I really encourage you guys to ask your questions away, because otherwise I'll ask mine, and I have like 1,000 questions for Teresa. So make sure that you provide us with your questions before the Q&A session starts. Well, during the Q&A session too. I mean, that's fine. Just fill the chat in with your questions. Right. So, shall we go, Mihai? What you say?
Yeah, I just want to share for a couple of seconds a message that we got from Ronnie Varghese, who basically helped us sponsoring acquiring the 10 books. So I'm just gonna share my screen for a second. 1 second.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so thank you, Ronnie, for helping making this possible. And I know that Ronnie and his team, they've already went with Teresa with the continuous discovery habits methodology. And I personally know from him that they are super excited about their findings, and they've really were able to discover some new streams of business for their side. So yeah, again, thank you, Ronnie. Thanks, Ronnie, for helping making this talk possible. That's it. I just wanted to take 30 seconds to share this with you. So yeah, we're gonna remove ourselves from the screen and we're gonna give the scene to you, Teresa, and then yeah, we'll see you guys in 25 minutes for the Q&A session.
Sounds good. I'm excited to see that Ronnie at Sarah Group was the sponsor for the books. He sent several of his teams through our coaching program, and one of his teams is actually featured in the book.
Okay, yeah, I've heard only super positive reviews. Yeah. So yeah, I'm quite excited your knowledge reached to the region, and then Ronnie and his team are really stepping the road for doing more.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, okay. We'll remove ourselves.
All right, welcome to the what and why of continuous discovery. I'm Teresa Torres. I will share that I've worked with teams all over the world, including, as we just discussed, my partner Hope worked with teams at Sierra that is based in Dubai. One of the reasons why I like to share this at the beginning of the talk is that this framework that we're going to talk about has been used in a lot of different contexts. I've worked with teams as small as a 2-person founding team up to really large multinational companies with hundreds of thousands of employees around the world in a wide variety of industries. And I like to share that because I know it's easy to sit in an audience and think, this will never work at my company. And odds are we've worked with a company like yours. So I really want to encourage you to start to think about how might you bring some of these practices to your own organization. So we're going to start at the very beginning with what do we mean by discovery. We often talk about discovery in contrast with delivery. And discovery is just meant to cover the things we do to make good decisions about what to build. We contrast that with the work that we're doing to build, ship, and maintain a production quality product. That's typically what we call delivery. So we're going to focus on the discovery side. How do we make good decisions about what to build? And the other thing that we're starting to see shift is from a project mindset to a continuous mindset. So many of us grew up in a project world. If we're lucky, we're infusing our customers into the project process by talking to a bunch at the beginning, making a whole bunch of decisions, maybe towards the end, validating it with some usability research or with some A/B testing. What we're going to talk about looks a little bit different. We're going to acknowledge that digital products are never done. We're always iterating on them. And so we need to start to adopt a continuous mindset. And I'm going to start with a definition of continuous discovery. So I define continuous discovery as weekly touch points with customers by the team building the product, where they're conducting small research activities in pursuit of a desired product outcome. Now, there's a lot to this definition. We're actually going to break it down line by line. So we're going to start with this first line, weekly touch points with customers. Why is this weekly cadence so important? So for most of us, whether we're product managers, designers, software engineers, or any of the other roles that support digital products, we're making decisions every day. Some of them are big strategic decisions, like which customers should we serve, what opportunities should we go after. Others are more pedestrian decisions, like what do we label this button? How should the underlying data model work? How do we expose this feature in the interface? Most of us know that for big strategic decisions, we need some customer input, but we often forget that our daily decisions, the more mundane everyday decisions, can also benefit from everyday decisions. The reason for this is product teams suffer from a bias called the curse of knowledge. We become experts in our products. We know where everything lives. We know how everything works. We know what's possible. And we start to make decisions from our point of view, forgetting what it's like to not have that expert knowledge. That is what the curse of knowledge says. We can't remember what it's like before we had that expert knowledge. So the easiest way to mitigate this is to just start engaging with customers on a weekly basis. So when we talk to customers more often, we start to see how we think about the product in a way that might be different from how our customers think about the product. And we start to make better decisions. There's another advantage to this. Many of us, when we only do validation research, we get feedback from customers at the very end of the process. It's a lot harder to integrate that feedback. We've already done all the design work. Maybe we've already done a lot of the delivery work. Changes are expensive. If we get feedback early and often, it means we're going to be getting feedback on half-baked ideas, on pencil sketches. Even we're going to be getting feedback on which problems to solve. This starts to lead to what I call a co-creation mindset. This is where we're going to work with our customers to co-create better solutions. Now, whenever I talk about co-creation, inevitably somebody thinks about either the Steve Jobs quote where he said, customers don't know what they want until we show it to them, or here in the US, we hear a lot of a Henry Ford quote where he might have said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So I want to be really clear here. We're not going to go to our customers and say, hey, what should we build? Because that's not our customers' expertise. Our expertise is what's possible with technology. Our customers' expertise is their own lives, their own world, their own needs and pain points. And so our goal with co-creation is to combine our expert knowledge of what's possible with technology with our customers' expert knowledge of what their lives are like and synthesize the two to build better products. So that's this first line, why we're going to talk about weekly touch points with customers. We're going to get into by the team building the product. And the key is that it's the team that's building the product that needs to be engaging with customers. We'll talk about why in just a second. But it starts with this idea of a product trio. So a product trio is typically comprised of a product manager, a designer, and a software engineer working together from the beginning to make good decisions about what to build. So making discovery decisions together. Now, the reason why this is so critical is I'm going to contrast it to what we used to do. We used to have the product manager work with business stakeholders, gather requirements, write product requirement documents, hand them off to the designer. The designer would do all the design work, hand them off to the engineer. The engineer would get the requirements and the designs and implement. What was wrong with this waterfall model? We saw with every handoff, context and nuances got lost. We also saw a ton of rework. The product manager would hand requirements to the designer. The designer would run into design constraints. We'd have to rewrite the requirements. We'd hand both off to the engineers. The engineers would run into technical constraints. We'd have to change the requirements, redo design. This is why a lot of projects end up over budget, under scoped, and late. So to avoid this, what we're learning is that we want these three roles collaborating from the very beginning, making good decisions about what to build. It's going to reduce those handoffs. It's going to allow us to build a shared context. It's going to allow this team to really make better decisions about what to build. And because this is the decision-making team, this is the team that needs to overcome that curse of knowledge. So they have expert knowledge about their product. They want to make sure they maintain making decisions from their customer's point of view. So we're going to have this team engaging with customers on a weekly basis. Now, most of us have more than just 3 people on our team. We have other engineers, we have QA folks, depending on our DevOps strategy, depending on how you interface with the rest of the business. You might have any number of roles on your team like data analysts, customer success folks, product marketing managers. Maybe you have the luxury of working with a user researcher. There could be dozens and dozens of roles on this slide. I'm not trying to exclude anybody. The idea here is that the trio leads discovery and they're consulting the other roles as needed. So this idea can flex based on the roles on your team. It can flex based on the types of decisions that you're making. So what that might look like is when you're working on your go-to-market strategy, you're probably going to invite your product marketing manager to be a part of that discovery work. If you're working on defining what analytics you're going to track and your data model, you're probably going to invite your data analyst to be a part of that discovery. So this is not a rigid concept. The idea is to get the right cross-functional roles in the room, making decisions together from the beginning. The thing to know, some people err on the side of including everybody in every decision. That's going to be very slow. The more people involved in every decision, the slower you will go. So we're trying to trade off the speed of decision making with the quality of decision making. So the quality, we want the right roles represented for each individual decision, but we want to keep the core team small enough that we can move quickly. Okay, so we talked about weekly touch points with customers by the team building the product. We're going to get into these last two lines because this is really the heart of the talk. Our goal when we're engaging with customers is to conduct small research activities in pursuit of a desired product outcome. So the key here is we can't take our traditional project-based research activities and try to jam them into a weekly cadence. We have to change our research methods to match a continuous cadence. And we have to remember, we're not doing research for research's sake, we're doing research to drive an outcome. One of the tools that I like to use to ensure that these two lines are happening is called an opportunity solution tree. This is a visual that I designed to help teams chart the best path to their desired outcome. It starts with defining a clear outcome. So I want to talk to this a little bit. Most of us grew up in a world where we're managed by outputs. We're either handed roadmaps or we're creating roadmaps where we're saying, these are the features we're going to build on this timeline. What we're seeing around the world is that teams are moving more to an outcome focus, where we're saying we don't know what outputs to create, but we know we need to have this business impact. This is the metric we're trying to move. Now, I like to use Netflix as my examples because Netflix is a global company and people around the world generally are familiar with them. If Netflix is not in your region, feel free to substitute them with any streaming entertainment company. What this might look like is Netflix is a subscription business. A key metric for them might be to increase subscriber retention. That would be the outcome at the top of the tree. Once that's in place, the team would then need to discover opportunities that would increase subscriber retention. So subscriber retention is how we're creating business value. Opportunities are how we're going to create customer value, because an opportunity represents a customer need, a customer pain point, or a customer desire. So we're looking for what are the customer needs, pain points, and desires that if we addressed them would drive our outcome in the Netflix case of increasing subscriber retention. And then naturally, we do need to discover the solutions that would address those opportunities. So what this visual is doing is it's helping us manage how do we deliver customer value in a way that drives business value. So it starts at the very top of the tree by defining an outcome. This outcome should be a two-way negotiation between your product leader. So this is your chief product officer, your VP of product. If you're at a really large company, it might be the general manager of a business unit. And it's a two-way negotiation between that product leader and your product trio. Here's why. The product leader should be communicating a business outcome. In our Netflix case, that's increased subscriber retention. The product trio is communicating how to translate that to a behavior that's occurring in the product. So that's a product outcome. So in our Netflix case, they might say, we think the way that we can impact subscriber retention is by driving viewer engagement. We're going to increase minutes watched on the platform. So there's a little bit of this two-way negotiation between the business need and the behavior that's happening in the product. Once that's defined, our team is now interviewing every week. This is the first small research activity we're doing on a weekly basis. We're interviewing to discover opportunities. So the goal of a customer interview is to uncover unmet needs, pain points, and desires. Now, most teams don't interview on a weekly basis, and that's because recruiting is tough. It's hard to find a customer to talk to every week. So what I encourage you to do is to start by automating your recruiting process. Very briefly, I'm going to give you 3 strategies for how to do this. The first is you can recruit people while they're using your product or service. So somewhere within your service, you can embed a request to join an interview. Very simple. The vast majority of teams that I work with use this method. I will tell you, you're not just going to launch it and it's going to work magically. You have to treat it like any other funnel in your product. You're going to have to optimize it. How much time do you ask for? What do you offer as a reward? Where do you show it? How do you craft the message? But I will tell you, in the vast majority of instances, this is the way to automate your recruiting process. It works very well for B2C companies, and it works very well for recruiting B2B end users. If you're trying to recruit B2B buyers, you can use your support teams. So who do I mean by this? Your sales teams, your account managers, your customer support teams, anybody who's already engaging with customers on a regular basis. You can define triggers for them. You can say, if you talk to a customer who has this need, ask them if they'll do an interview with the product team and let them schedule an interview directly on your calendar. The third method, building out a customer advisory board, works really well when you have a very hard to reach audience. So by this I mean Fortune 500 CEOs, maybe respiratory ICU doctors and nurses during the height of COVID. We're talking about people who have very limited time. You can build long-term engagements with them where they're agreeing to do a monthly interview over a period of time. The vast majority of the teams that I work with use one of these 3 methods. They're actually mixing and matching the methods to build a really robust recruiting automation. Once that's in place, we need to start to look at how do we ask the right questions. The key to good interviewing is to avoid speculation. So again, if we stick with our Netflix example, I don't want to ask you, what do you like to watch? Who do you watch with? How do you decide what to watch? That's what I want to learn, but all of those questions are going to lead to speculative answers. That's because human brains are not very good at answering direct questions outside of a specific context. Our cognitive biases intervene, and we collect unreliable feedback. The way to fix this is to collect specific stories about the past. So instead of saying, what do you like to watch on Netflix? How do you decide what to watch? I'm going to ask you, tell me about the last time you watched Netflix. And I'm going to listen for, what did you watch? How did you decide? What device were you on? So I'm going to get answers to all of those questions, but I'm going to get them in the context of a specific story. This is going to dramatically increase the reliability of what I hear. It's also going to help me start to map out the opportunity space. I'm going to hear unmet needs, pain points, and desires in the stories that you tell. Once I have a deep understanding of the opportunity space, I'm going to choose a target opportunity. And my goal is to consider multiple solutions for the same opportunity. Now, most of us don't do this. We hear a customer need and we jump to our first solution and we ask what I call a whether or not decision. A whether or not decision is when we start to test and experiment and we say, is this idea good or not? The problem with this framing is it exacerbates 2 different biases. The first is called the escalation of commitment. The more we invest in an idea, the more we identify with it, the more we fall in love with it. The more we fall in love with an idea, the more we exacerbate confirmation bias. Confirmation bias says we're more likely to see the evidence that our idea is true and completely miss the evidence that suggests our idea is flawed. Again, there's a very easy way to avoid this, and that's just to set up a good compare and contrast decision. So we're going to ask which of these ideas looks most promising. So instead of working with one solution at a time, we're going to work with a set of solutions, and we're going to compare and contrast them against each other. Now, this is an important enough idea. I'm going to give you a visual to help you remember this. We're just kicking off the Summer Olympics in Tokyo. This is a photo of Usain Bolt. He was once the world's fastest 100-meter runner. If I asked you, is Usain Bolt fast or not? I want you to hear a whether or not question and to ask, is he fast relative to what? What's your compare and contrast? Is he fast relative to a cheetah? Probably not. Is he fast relative to a Tesla? In the first 100 meters, I would love to see that race. I have no idea who would win. Is he fast relative to other humans? Absolutely. What we're seeing on the right is a compare and contrast decision where we have a clear front runner. This is what you're looking for when we're making good compare and contrast decisions. We're looking for a solution that jumps ahead of the pack. Now, the reason why most of us don't do this is because we're doing project-based research. We can't do project-based research for 3 ideas. It would take way too long. We can't prototype pixel-perfect working prototypes for 3 different ideas. We don't want to do all of that design work before we know what the right solution is. We don't want to A/B test all 3 solutions because that would require building all 3 before we learned which one was in best. So we have to change our project-based research activities to make them smaller and to make them more sustainable to be continuous. So to show what this looks like, I'm going to continue with my Netflix example. I want you to imagine that I interviewed a bunch of Netflix customers, and one of the opportunities that I heard over and over again is I want to watch sports. Netflix is pretty good at TV shows and movies. They're not very good at sports. Let's suppose that Netflix wanted to tackle this. Now, Netflix is a good product company. They know they should set up a compare and contrast decision. So they suggest 3 solutions. The first is they look at, let's integrate local TV stations. So I don't know how this works in your region, but here in the United States, we have 3 local networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC. A lot of our sporting events are on those local networks. For example, the Olympics right now are broadcast on NBC. So if we could integrate NBC into Netflix, then we could watch the Olympics on Netflix. Second example is we could build partnerships directly with the sporting agencies and integrate the games directly into the Netflix interface. So in this instance, maybe we would partner with the Olympic Committee and get broadcast rights to include the games directly in Netflix. The third solution would be, we're Netflix, we're not very good at sports. Maybe we'll partner with somebody who is. So Fubo TV is a streaming service that's fairly good at sports. And maybe Netflix says, when you buy Netflix, we'll bundle a Fubo TV subscription. Okay, we don't have time to build all 3 of these and figure out which one is best. So how do we change our research activities so that we can quickly assess which one is our clear front runner? The key is to break our ideas into underlying assumptions and to test those assumptions. So let's talk about what I mean by assumptions. Each of our products are built on a set of categories of assumptions. The first are desirability assumptions. Does anybody want this solution? Are they willing to do what we need them to do to get value from the solution? Second set of assumptions, the viability assumptions. Would this solution create value for the business? If we're an outcome-focused team, this is as simple as, will the solution drive our outcome? Feasibility assumptions. Can we build it? Is it possible? Do we have the necessary skills? Will the technology support it? I'm going to add 2 more categories. The first is usability assumptions. Can people use it? Do they understand it? Can they find it? Are they able to do what we need them to do? And the last is ethical assumptions. Is there any potential harm in building this solution? This is where we can look at what data are we collecting? How are we storing it? How are we using it? Do our customers understand it? It's also where we can look at social inequities and inclusivity. Who are we choosing to serve, whether that's an explicit or implicit decision? And as a result, who are we leaving out? Are we leaving out our underrepresented populations? Now, knowing these 5 categories will help you generate assumptions. However, it can be very challenging to see our own assumptions. So one strategy to help you generate assumptions is to story map your idea. Now, if you're not familiar with story mapping, I'm going to walk you through it. The yellow boxes on this slide is the story map, and I'll get to the gray boxes in just a minute. We're going to start by assuming our solution already exists. So in this case, we're talking about integrating NBC into Netflix so we can watch the Olympics. We're going to assume that already exists, and we're going to map out what does our subscriber have to do to get value out of this solution. So step one, they have to decide to watch the game. They have to open a streaming service. In this case, we're going to hope it's Netflix. They have to choose a streaming service. They have to find a local channel. So in this case, they're not going to see sporting events. They're going to see ABC, NBC, CBS, and they're going to have to pick NBC. And then they're going to watch whatever's live on NBC. So then they're going to watch the game. Now, what I'm doing with the yellow boxes is this is where I'm starting to surface assumptions. For every step of my story map, I'm asking what needs to be true in order for my customer to do each step. So what needs to be true for them to decide to watch the game? Our subscribers have to want to watch sports. That's an assumption that I'm making. They have to know that they can watch sports on Netflix. They have to want to watch sports on Netflix. If I jump all the way over to finding a local channel, they have to know what channel the game is on. We have to be able to partner with that channel. Now here in the US, we have all sorts of regional broadcast rights. So here's what that means. It means the Olympics might be on NBC, but if I live in San Francisco and for whatever reason NBC has decided San Francisco doesn't get the Olympics, even if I get NBC, the sporting event might be blacked out. So we're also assuming the game will be available in your region, right? So this is allowing me to surface a bunch of assumptions. Now the value of doing this is it's faster to test our assumptions than it is to test the whole idea. So we're going to walk through what this looks like. We're going to start with our subscribers want to watch sports, and I'm going to give you 3 ways to quickly test this assumption. The first is I can prototype to simulate a specific moment. I want to be really clear here. We're not doing pixel perfect designs of the entire solution. We're prototyping just enough to test this very specific assumption. So what this might look like, I might just give you some options. Here's a TV show, here's a movie, here's a sporting event, and I might ask you, what do you want to watch right now? It's not even a prototype of an interface. It's just a provocation that gets me the data I need to test my assumption. If I have access to an unmoderated testing tool, I can design and test this assumption test in less than 24 hours. The second way I can test this is with a 1-question survey. Surveys get a bad rep, and for good reason. It's because it's hard to design a good survey question. So I'm going to give you some tips. I don't want you to ask hypothetical questions about the future. Would you watch sports? I don't want you to ask ambiguous questions like, have you ever watched a sport? Do you watch sports? Because most people are going to answer yes, because we've watched a sporting event at some time in our life. I want you to ask about specific instances in the past, just like we do with interviewing. Have you watched a sporting event in the past week? Yes or no. The value of 1-question surveys, we can run them directly in our product or service, and we can collect fast answers. Again, most teams can collect many data points in a few hours to a day or 2. This is a very fast way to test a specific assumption. The third way we could test this assumption is to ask, are our customers already exhibiting the behavior we would expect to see? So what data do we have that allows us to evaluate this? When you're doing this, you can look at all sorts of data. You can look at your behavioral analytics. You can look at your support tickets. You can talk to your sales teams. Using our Netflix example, we might look at our search queries and say, are any of our subscribers already looking for sports? Are they already searching for sports terms? What's nice about this is for most assumptions, you can either prototype a specific moment, you can ask a 1-question survey, or you can look at existing data, and as little as a few hours or a day or 2, you can rapidly collect data on multiple assumptions. The value of this is when you collect data on multiple assumptions, you're able to quickly compare and contrast your solutions against each other. Now I'm going to give you a 4th strategy for testing assumptions. This strategy is going to help us with our feasibility assumptions. Oftentimes we ask our engineers to estimate what it would take to build something, and they simply don't know. And so what we ask them to do is we ask them to do a research spike and say, go investigate it. The problem with that is that's too open-ended of a task. We don't end up getting good estimates out the back end. What we want to do instead is give them a very specific assumption to test. So what might this look like? If we take our example of integrating NBC into Netflix, we might be concerned that NBC doesn't give us the data we need to expose the right data in our interface. So we might tell our engineers, go use the NBC API, pull out some sporting events, and test. Can you display the name? Can you display the description? Do you have an appropriate image that fits in our interface? And what you're doing is you're giving them a day or two. A research spike is just a time-boxed amount of time for them to go investigate something. And you're asking them to provide data on a very specific assumption. That allows you to test the assumption. It allows you to collect compare and contrast data. And by the time you decide to build, it'll help you with better estimates. Okay, we just covered a lot of ground. So I'm going to do a quick recap. We started at the top of this tree by defining a clear outcome. We then moved to interviewing on a regular cadence to discover customer needs, customer pain points, and customer desires. We've collectively called those opportunities. When we choose a target opportunity, we're working with a set of solutions so that we can compare and contrast them against each other. Our goal is to avoid the escalation of commitment and confirmation bias. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to break our solutions down into their underlying assumptions. And we're going to use prototyping, one-question surveys, data mining, and research spikes to rapidly test those assumptions and compare and contrast our solutions, looking for a clear front runner. Now, because we just covered a lot of ground quickly, I will share everything that I've covered is in my book, Continuous Discovery Habits. This should be available around the world. If you have access to an Amazon property, it is available on paperback and Kindle. If you do not have access to an Amazon property, you should be able to order it from any bookstore. If they do not have it in stock, they should be able to order it for you because it's available as a print-on-demand book. So they don't have to carry inventory. If you're having a problem tracking down a copy, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at ttorres or on LinkedIn, and I will help you out. This book was designed to help product managers, software engineers, designers, and anybody else who works on a digital product put the frameworks and methods that we just talked about into practice. All right, I think we're ready for some questions.
Thank you, Teresa. That was great.
Thank you.
All right. So before we go into questions from the audience, I would like to ask a question of myself. So you said that at the end, that it's meant to be applied on digital products. Do you think your methodology would not adapt on any other form of products or in any other industries?
Yeah, this is a great question. So what you're going to read about in the book was developed based on problem solving, decision making, and critical thinking research. So I do believe it is applicable to all sorts of problems. I teach a general business class at Northwestern University here in the US, where our students are applying it to things like employee engagement. So they're not digital products. I also use this framework in my own life to tackle things like where should I live, right? So I think it's broadly applicable. My professional experience is working with teams that work on digital products. So you'll see in the book, the examples are about digital products, but I do think it is widely applicable.
Right. Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah.
I'll take the next question, which I relate in some terms. What if you are a startup and you have a low or no clients yet? How do you deal with that? How do you make sure that you're asking the right people?
Yeah, so
I a lot of people are thinking about that. So yeah.
Yeah, this is a great question. So if you're a brand new company, you have no product, you don't have any customers yet, you have to find a way to get in front of your target customers. So here's what you need. You need to have a theory of who your customer is, and you need to have a theory of what your value proposition is. You do not need a product yet. So I'll give an example of this. Let's suppose I'm going to start a new company. My target audience are podcasters, and my belief is I'm going to help them grow their audience. So I'm going to help podcasters grow their target audience. I have no idea how I'm going to do that. I don't know what product I'm going to build. I need to find a way to go learn from podcasters. I can do that in a few ways. I can launch a landing page. Again, I don't know what my product is. The landing page is going to be all about, do you need help growing your audience? I can drive traffic to that landing page. I can recruit people while they go there for interviews. We see a lot of startups do this. It's a classic demand test from straight out of the lean startup. I could go to LinkedIn groups or Facebook groups about podcasters and hang out and make connections. So here's the key. There's two principles to this. You need to find a way to bring them to you. That's usually through paid advertising, or you need to find a way to go to where they hang out. So that could be in person, that could be online, but you do need to find a way to connect with them.
And I would like to add to this question. So we discussed what do you do when you have no clients, but what if you have, like, let's say you're a market leader and your audience is well spread, right? You have different segments of user types and so on and so forth. How do you focus, or how do you decide on which one of them to focus?
Yeah, there's two places this can show up. So one is when you're setting your outcome, right? So some teams, their outcome, the audience is implied. Increase engagement with binge watchers, right? The audience is implied. It's a segment you're focused on. So sometimes that's happening at the strategic context level where your leadership is saying we're prioritizing this audience. Sometimes we don't know that yet, right? And so your audience is figure out who we should, your outcome is figure out who we should drive engagement for. So your outcome is just increase engagement, and it could be with anybody. Now that's going to get pushed down to the opportunity space. You're going to have to interview a wide variety of people and start to assess where's there the biggest opportunity, who's going to be the easiest people to engage, and what value is that going to create for the business. So sometimes that who is baked into the outcome, sometimes it's represented in the opportunity space.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Do you have a question, Mihai, right now?
No, you can pick up, yeah.
All right. Let's see. So we have here, well, this is a bit of a, let's say of a more basic one, but someone's asking, what's the difference between your methodology and lean startup methodology? The cyber lead asks this.
Yeah. So, okay, one of my goals with the book was to look at, so we have 1 million tools and frameworks, right? We have OKRs, we have jobs to be done, we have design thinking, we have agile, we have Scrum, we have lean, we have models like the Kano model, and right, like 1 million tools and frameworks. So we could replace this question with, what's the difference between any framework and this? Here was my goal. My goal was to look at what's the underlying structure to what we do in discovery. How do we make good decisions? I personally believe that underlying structure is start with an outcome, discover opportunities, discover solutions. The methodologies, the frameworks, the tactics that we use to do each of those steps, we can mix and match based on our own team's preference. So some teams use OKRs for outcomes. Other teams use their company's KPIs. Other teams use SBV, strategic initiatives, objectives. I don't remember the right acronym for it, right? There's 1 million formats for how to set goals. In the opportunity space, some people like to do jobs to be done interviews. I prefer story-based interviewing. Other people like to do customer observations. That's a great way to uncover opportunities. So there's 1 million ways to uncover opportunities. When we talk about testing solutions, we can prototype, we can run assumption tests, we can do large quantitative studies. So there's, again, you can mix and match the methods. So now let's dive into the lean startup specifically. The lean startup gives us, for your solution, test the underlying assumptions, right? So there's a lot of overlap. What I'll tell you the lean startup doesn't give you is what's your outcome, what are your opportunities, are you comparing and contrasting? It's very focused on take a solution, break it down into its underlying assumptions, go get rapid feedback. So the lean startup is one part of the puzzle, but I think our work is broader than that.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. I'll pick up Salim's question, and I'll want to add a little bit of detail to that. So how can smaller teams afford to have tech leads involved in continuous discovery when you are limited with development capacity? Surely you need to, at times, prioritize when to involve tech leads. And I know they've been discussing about this a little bit down in the comments. What I would like to also to add from my side is how useful are tech leads to be always involved, especially since some products might not be very technical. So if you can reply to both of this, would be great.
Yeah, so let's talk about this a little bit. So first of all, don't take a project mindset to this. So if we think about research from a project mindset, engineers do not have time to do project research, right? We're not going to ask our engineers to sit in 6 interviews a week. We're not going to ask them to spend hours a day in meetings synthesizing what we're learning. We're not going to ask them to spend hours a day doing discovery. They need to spend the bulk of their day writing code. So that's the first thing. When we talk about continuous discovery, we're doing small research activities in pursuit of a desired outcome. So what are those small research activities? We're talking about 1 or 2 interviews a week. An interview can be 20 or 30 minutes. So an engineer is spending at most an hour a week interviewing customers. Beyond that, we're talking about rapidly testing assumptions. We're launching a survey. Our designers doing a quick prototype and collecting unmoderated testing feedback, and then we're getting together almost like a quick stand-up. What did we learn? What do we need to do next? So if your research activities are small enough, we're not talking about hours and hours a week. So that's the first thing. It's not a lot of time. That is the value of continuous discovery over project-based discovery. The second thing is a little bit counterintuitive, but remember, we're trying to remove handoffs. We're trying to communicate context and nuance. And what that gets us is in delivery, we get less rework. We get less back and forth. So by having your engineer participate in these small research activities on a continuous basis, your delivery will actually go faster. So I want you to think about it as having your engineer participate in discovery will actually speed up your delivery. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but for teams that work this way, they will never go back because they see the benefit, they see that it's faster, they see that people are more engaged, and that most importantly, they build better products.
But can I just ask you that you would want to involve tech leads where the project is super technical, or you just want to involve them to give them more, to make them feel like they're closer to the client and part of the team?
Look, it's this simple. Engineers will build better solutions if they understand the problems they're trying to solve, if they understand who they're solving problems for, if they're part of the process from the very beginning about making decisions about what to build. The root of this question comes from an IT mindset. What do we get with an IT mindset? Engineers are order takers. Businesses can tell them what to build. We are not getting value from our engineers if that's the way we're operating, because we don't know what to tell them what to build. They are the experts in what's possible. They are the experts in technology. We want them involved from the very beginning about what to build. That's how we get better solutions. And I totally recognize this is probably not how most of you work, because the prevalent model in our industry right now is an old IT model. But the best teams are moving away from an IT model to a product model where they're getting way more value out of their engineers. There's a phenomenal book about this out right now called Ask Your Developer. It's by the founder of Twilio. It's all about if you want to get better products out of your engineers, you need to include them from the very beginning.
So you could say I have a technical background. That's why I was reluctant including tech leads. Okay. Stefan, you have another question?
Yeah. So I'll get a bit. I see that my answer is my questions are answered too. So I have one of my own. So you said that we should be gathering, let's say, 3 opportunities from the market. How often should these opportunities be research through customer interviews or customer discovery? And should we ever be using, like an educated guess?
Yeah, okay, so let's separate a couple of things. So we're
Yeah.
interviewing to discover opportunities. That's needs, pain points, and desires.
Mm.
We're discovering more than 3 opportunities. When you're interviewing, you're going to hear dozens of opportunities. And so this activity of having to map out the opportunity space and really make a strategic decision about where do we want to play. Where the 3 came from was once you choose a target opportunity, I want you working with 3 solutions at once. That's where we're going to compare and contrast. So it's 3 solutions for the same target opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do your opportunities have to come from interviews? I recommend this because it's going to help to make sure your opportunity is real. Interviewing is something that we can do on a weekly basis. You can talk to an interview every week. There are other ways to discover opportunities. You can discover opportunities by doing customer observations. In fact, I would argue that's a better way to discover opportunities, but it's not as sustainable. Most of us can't go observe customers every week. But if you do have that ability, that's another method you can use for discovering opportunities, right? So opportunities are just how do we go out and learn about our customer? Where do they have needs? Where do they have pain points? Where do they have desires? How do we build a rich understanding of that? I think the easiest, most sustainable way to do that is to interview continuously. There are other methods. You can mix and match them based on what's available to you. Like, for example, if you work at, like here in the US, if you work at Target, or in Europe, if you work at Tesco, these are retail shops that are available everywhere, and finding a customer to talk to is dead simple. You actually probably could observe customers on a regular basis, right? You could go into a store, observe them. It's really low barrier. That's not most of us. Most of us, it's much simpler to just interview every week.
Right. Thank you, Teresa.
I'll take Yasser's question. How would you approach organizations that are more OCR heavy to adopt OST?
That are more
OKR.
OKR heavy. Yeah, so this process works great with OKRs. So an OKR is a qualitative objective with some quantitative key results, right? And when they're used well, your quantitative key results are multiple ways of measuring the same objective. So that maps directly to an outcome. Your outcome should be quantitative, so it maps nicely to a key result. If you have 3 key results for the same objective, as long as they truly are 3 different ways of measuring the same objective, you would have 1 opportunity solution tree. Now, I do see a lot of teams have really poorly defined OKRs, where the key results are actually outputs. We even see this in one of the books about OKRs, the book Build What Matters by John Doerr. A lot of the examples in that book are not great because the key results are outputs. They're build X. That is not the original intent behind OKRs. Like if you read about Andy Grove's description of it from Intel, where they originated, or even Google's description of it, or Christina Woodkey's book, Radical Focus, is a much better representation of how OKRs are intended to use. If your key results are truly outcomes, so they're quantitative metrics that help you measure progress towards your objective, they're a very nice way of doing outcomes that would then be at the top of your opportunity solution tree.
Could you give us a small example between, what a bad OKR looks like and what a good OKR looks like, so that we have clear view?
Yeah. So let's say that we want to be an objective would be the best streaming service around the world, right? And we're looking at key results. What helps us achieve that? Some people define their key results as launch an Android app. That's not a key result. That's an output. That's something that would go on a roadmap. That is not a metric, right? So now, launching an Android app might help you become the best streaming entertainment company in the world, but it's not a key result. A key result is a quantitative metric that helps us measure our progress. So key results might be things like increase the number of countries where we have at least 25% market share.
Right.
Or increase the number of countries where we have at least 25% market share and 65 NPS score. Right? That's a quantitative metric that helps us evaluate, are we on our way to being the best streaming entertainment company in the world?
And the question from the audience is, we asked in the beginning, what books would you recommend? And it seems like Salim wants to know, what are the best resources that would teach us how to conduct user research properly, avoiding biases and so on and so forth?
Yeah, so one of my goals with continuous discovery habits is just to help you adopt these research methods in a way that will get you reliable feedback. So one chapter in the book is all about interviewing. We dive deep on how to automate your recruiting process. We dive deep on what are the right questions to ask. I even get into the research on why those are the right questions to ask. There's several chapters about identifying and testing assumptions and how to do it in a reliable way. So my goal with the book was to give you the most common strategies. If you want to go deeper than that, we have a number of other really good books. Cindy Alvarez has written a really great book. I think it's her 5-year anniversary of lean customer development. The Mom Test is a really good book on interviewing. David Bland has a great book called Testing Business Ideas about assumption testing. So there's a wide variety of books you can supplement, but my goal with continuous discovery habits was to give you the backbone. Where do you start? What are the most simple and most common tools and frameworks that will put you on a good path? And then you can use some of those other books to supplement.
Okay. I mean, I think we've got some very deep knowledge here, and we are also close reaching to our time limit. Stefan, are there any questions that you really want to bring up, or and you haven't, or?
If you could keep Teresa for another hour or two, I think I could. I could come up with a bunch of others. Laura Figueroa, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, is asking where can I buy your book? She told us earlier, but I would ask Teresa to tell us again where we can find her books.
Yeah, so if you have access to an Amazon property, it's available through paperback and Kindle on Amazon. If you have access to other online retailers, it should be available in paperback and EPUB, so you can choose digital or print. If you prefer to buy it from a local bookstore, it is being distributed through the major wholesale distribution channel that they can all order from. So even if they don't carry the book, you can ask them to order a copy for you.
And we've also posted the link here so that you can get it from Amazon. And
Dan Dumitru has one last question. And I want to ask you this because he asked us another question earlier, and we kind of covered it with another answer. He's asking, how would you identify a company, to work within that uses your paradigm? How can we find these companies that have these updated methodologies, let's say?
Yeah, this is a really great question. So I know because of the region we're in, our sponsor, Sierra, is investing heavily in these strategies. So I'm going to give Ronnie another shout out. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I think it's not about the companies. There are very few companies that are doing this across the board. It's less about the company. It's more about the product leaders. So I would look for who are the product leaders that are espousing this way of working. Ronnie is actually a great example of this. Ronnie is a product leader who sent his teams through coaching. He's read the book. He drank the Kool-Aid. He wants his teams to work this way. You want to look for more Ronnies. So even the big name companies that you've heard of, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Netflix, they're not consistent across the board. So there's some companies that are working in good ways, and there's some teams that have less good ways. So think about it more as, how do I find the right bosses? And you can do this by looking at LinkedIn profiles, by looking at who's writing about it, who's speaking about it at conferences, who's going on podcasts about it. So think about it as a people problem and not a company problem.
So I think asking the right questions at the interview or during the interview phases are probably going to help you then in your endeavor to finding these great leaders that you could follow or learn from.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Teresa. It was amazing. I really loved our chat, and the questions were great, and the answers were better than the questions anyway. Oh, do share your feedback. Yeah, do share your feedback with us. We have a form there, and you can get one of Teresa's books as a reward or as a giveaway. We've got 10 of them. So I guess that's it from my side. Mihai, anything from your side?
No, thanks a lot, Teresa. We are super grateful for you joining and sharing some of your experience for our region. And yeah, we look forward to get more knowledge from you. And yeah, for the rest of the people, stay in touch for our next product events.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, too.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
See ya.